Hey guys, it's me Iceberg, and today I'm reviewing another new budget model. This is the ZiiGaat Rumba, single dynamic driver IEMs for around $35, created in collaboration between ZiiGaat folks and the Mexican audio reviewer vivirdigital. So, hola como estas amigos, if you are watching me from Mexico. Alright, the Rumba is probably the cheapest IEMs in the entire ZiiGaat lineup, and essentially an entry-level IEMs for anyone who's just getting into the chifi industry or simply wanna try out the ZiiGaat brand without spending too much. Personally, I've already reviewed a bunch of ZiiGaat IEMs and all of them have been fantastic, from the Lush to the Arete 2, which impressed me in different ways. And now let's see if the ZiiGaat Rumba could stand out in this competitive market in the ultra budget segment. Let's get into it. Well, the Rumba comes in a small box with an image of the shells and the model name on the front, and the brief specs on the side with 32 impedance and 109 sensitivity, so these Rumba are basically plug-and-play device that will work with any sources. Okay, inside the box we get the Rumba shells with the black to red faceplates, and I think this is one of the favorite vivirdigital color combinations. And inside there is a nozzle which isn't too long and 5.9mm wide, with a single vent right next to it, and on the side we can see a slightly recessed 2-pin socket and another vent hole. Also the vivirdigital name and logo are shown here, which is repeated on the right shell. Next up we get a 2-pin cable with a 3.5mm jack, which is quite light, flexible and pretty pleasant to use, so I didn't experience any issues with it during the entire listening sessions. And lastly we get two sets of the basic silicone ear tips, rounded balanced tips with a standard bore, and the wide bore tips designed to emphasize vocals and highs. And of course we get a manual with a playlist card that follows the overall design. Alright, talking about the shape and fit, the Rumba is smaller than average shells, quite light at about 5g each, and has a pretty familiar, friendly shape that often found in the budget IEMs. And if you take a closer look, we can see a rather slim and ergonomic shape inside, but without any sharp angles, so the shells fit snugly and deeply in my small ears, though not comfy enough, and I believe this is because of the shape of my ears, rather than a simply bad shell design. However guys, I would recommend trying out this shape before buying, if you're unsure whether it will work for you or not. And just a quick mention about the sound isolation, here it's really good, so it efficiently blocks out noise no matter where you are, whether you're in quiet settings at home, a noisy office, or at a loud party and on a transport. Okay guys, the sound in the Rumba is delivered by a single 10mm dynamic driver with the graphene diaphragm, and as ZiiGaat claims, this type of diaphragm is supposed to surpass the rest, making the sound more responsive, fast, clear and all of that. And like you know, I've already tried just about every type of dynamic driver out there, and the only ones I can really point out are the diamond-like diaphragm used in most kiwiears and ZiiGaat models, and the glass diaphragm used in some ZiiGaat models. But graphene, being honest, is something I'm seeing for the first time, so let's take a closer look at it, starting with a graph to understand the Rumba's tuning. Well look, these ones have a super distinguished shape vibe, with a 10 dB bass shelf that stays boosted all the way up to the lower bit range, which tell us about the strong bass presence in these IEMs. Then we see the mid-range, which is recessed here, and I don't like this dip between 6 and 800 Hz, where the lower vocal range is located, and then we see a sharp rise toward the upper mids, which looks pretty natural to me. And in the treble region we can see the several local peaks at 8 and 13k Hz, with a typical dip at 11k Hz, which soften all the sibilants, squeaks and grit in this range. And guys, moving to my listening experience, I spent a long time trying to find the right genre for these, because you know, they are the least versatile among the supposedly versatile IEMs I ever tried. You know, the Rumba has a more V-shaped sound signature than we can see in the graph, boosting the bass so it expands and rumbles beautifully, and also pushing the treble up to make it brighter, more sparkling and ready to explode. And you know, it's pretty safe to call these IEMs balanced, but at the same time, the vocals are really lost here. I mean, the vocals are centered and presented pretty close, but they sound really dry, like being on the flat surface, and that really makes it hard to pinpoint the right genre for these IEMs. And you know, the Rumba also depends a lot of the ear tips, and when testing them with the balanced tips with the standard bore, I always felt a certain tightness, like the edges of the frequency range were compressed, where I didn't get enough sub-bass depth, and the upper treble didn't seem as spacious and airy as it should be. But once I switched to the whiteboard tips, like my Trial Clarion, then the situation immediately improved. So I got enough extension in the very low and very high ranges, and most importantly, that feeling of tightness disappeared, and the soundstage became more spacious. So guys, I recommend you experiment with the different ear tips to find out which ones suit you the best. Okay, after listening to a lot of tracks, the first one I like here was End of the Beginning by Joe, where Rumba captured the vibe of these melancholic tracks almost perfectly. And I especially like the drum beats at the beginning and the transitions, which were, you know, very smooth like a butter, but once again, I don't like the vocals here, even with the whiteboard tips, because it stays in the single range, like in a mono mode. And for the next track I choose Do I Wanna Know by Arctic Monkeys, and I especially like the beat and the meaty electro guitar sound at the beginning, because it was really energetic and dynamic, and while the vocals kicks in, it was like, firstly the vocals sounded inside the track and didn't really catch my attention, you know, like these IEMs smooth out the vocal sound in the lower and upper octaves, and that's pretty weird for me. And guys, if you have the Rumba, let me know if you have different experience. And the last track I would like to test is Siren Screen by OE, and it's probably the best things I ever heard here. I mean, I really like, you know, that rise in the bass, and I can definitely feel the depth of the sub-bass here, which goes pretty deep with the dance body, and you can really feel the layering of the bass, and those start to stop shifts in the track's intensity. That was truly phenomenal. And here I have to say, this dynamic driver really showed its best in the terms of bass presence, the placements of the elements in the space, and those fast but very smooth transitions. I mean, all kinds of EDM sounds amazing on the Rumba, and it's like a massage for your ears that you'll have to try it out. Alright, talking about the sound in detail, the bass and treble here are the main two elements creating it, while the mid-range, I would say it stays more in the background and complements the instruments well, rather than the vocals. So the bass here has a good resolution, and the weight of the notes on the drums and electronic guitar really makes you feel it with your whole head. But at the same time, it maintains good control and feels limited, so it doesn't sound too boomy or muddy. The mid-range here seemed quite balanced to me, but clinically dry, like, you know, you sometimes get in highly analytical models, but without that level of detail, and here that presentation style just doesn't work. Personally, in many tracks, I've always wanted a bit more expressions, a bit more emotions, and some variety in the vocals timbre, but almost every time I got something that sounded like vocals were coming from the nose, and just awful. And talking about the treble, it's pretty bright here, but without crossing any limits, so it's well extended, and I especially like the subtle yet bright sparkle at the very top of the vocals or instruments, which kinda saved the day. However, I still feel it like a bit of airiness and ringing overtones, but for $35, getting the treble like this is actually a pretty good find. And finally, the technical aspect. So here the soundstage is medium sized, with a chamber effect, and what I especially miss here is a sense of airiness. I mean, that extra space needed to listen to fast and heavy genres. However, what I did like is the separation here was quite clear and well defined, with pauses and the imaging was excellent, allowing me to pinpoint the direction of the sounds with the maximum precision. However, I especially love the transients here, which are quite smooth yet fast, without any staircase effect, and that works well not only for music, but also for movies and games, thanks to the good localization of sounds in the space. So guys, in conclusion, for me the Rumba are IEMs that always require some compromises, and now I realize they are definitely designed for specific target audience. You know, of course there are entry-level IEMs, and they are supposed to be easy to use, and yes, that's true. There are some pretty much the same on any source, and their feed is quite universal, making them essentially a plug-and-play device, but these are not kind of IEMs you're likely to be completely satisfied with right off the box. And here's the thing. Firstly, the Rumba is very dependent on the tips you choose, and now I understand why ZiiGaat includes a second set of the whiteboard tips, simply because the sound is much better with them than with the standard ones. And secondly, these are the least versatile IEMs I ever had in terms of genre choice. You know, during the entire testing sessions, I tried to find a track that would even slightly match the Rumba's vibes, and only a few actually work well with them. And generally talking, for me most genres just sound like a crap with these, except for EDM and some melancholic tracks that kinda hooked me. And in the end I'm giving this a 6 out of 10, and you guys have to know what you are getting the Rumba for. I mean, if you're a fan of this kinda bassy but fairly tight sound and know exactly which genre you'll be using them for, then go ahead and get them. But for the same price tag, I will go for the kiwiears chorus, which is an upgraded version of the bell with a more open, airy, yet equally bassy sound without that muffled feeling or having to change the ear tips. Or for the extra $50 I would recommend the kiwiears Cadenza 2, which are the step up in the sound quality with greater resolution, better detail reproduction, and car stereo technology for a subwoofer like bass effect. Alright, many thanks to the linsoul and vivirdigital for these IEMs, and I left all the purchase link for the Rumba in the description below, so be sure to check them out. And if you enjoyed this review, then your like and subscribe are the best way to show your support, and I really appreciate it. This was Iceberg, take care, and I'll see you in the next one, bye!